Hello, welcome to the latest episode of Data Unchained. I'm your host, Molly Presley. Before I introduce today's guests, let me tell you a little bit about this podcast. So we called it Data Unchained as we think about the evolution of how data is both being created as well as how it's being used. If you think back to the mainframe days, decades ago, where the humans, the applications, the computers were all in one building together, to the way the world runs today, that we have applications in the cloud and human beings working all over the place and compute that's quite powerful in our devices, as well as all the way up to big supercomputers and GPUs. So data has become very distributed. And that introduces interesting challenges, certainly, with how to just protect it, know what you have. But then as you want to put it to use in things like enterprise AI, it can also be challenging. That's what Data Unchained focuses on, and today's guests are experts in this space, so we're really excited to have you on today. I'll start with Juan. Juan Sequeda is a principal researcher for data lakes, data and analytics at ServiceNow. Juan, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Molly, thank you so much for having us. So as you said, my name is Juan Sequeda. I have been in the data analytics space for close to a little over now 2 decades. I'm a scientist by training by heart. I did my undergrad and my PhD in computer science at the University of Texas at Austin. I've been working in this whole area of where is now very popular of knowledge graphs, coming from the semantic web world back in 2005 when I got into it. So for me, it's really exciting that I've been working in this space for so long, and finally the stuff that I've been working on is heading more mainstream, and one of the reasons why people are paying attention is because of AI. So I've done startups undergrad, I've done research, and now at ServiceNow through the acquisition of Data.World, where we joined 6 months ago.
Great. And Tim Gasper is a partner in crime, I guess, over at ServiceNow. And I know you guys are also podcast hosts and have your own podcast together. So maybe, Tim, you can talk a little bit about your podcast and a little bit of your background. At ServiceNow, you're the Senior Director of Outbound Product Management for the Data Analytics Division. So tell us a little bit about yourself, as well as maybe you guys can jointly share a little bit about the podcast that you guys are on.
Yeah, sure. I'll start quickly by saying thanks, Molly, for having us on the show. And just to briefly introduce myself, Tim Gasper. I've been in the data and analytics space, mostly in a product management capacity for the last 15 plus years, starting in really on unstructured document management. I spent a lot of time when the big data craze really became the top headline. And so Hadoop, streaming, got to do a lot around those technologies. And then more recently, it's been, of course, more around advanced analytics and AI. And I know some of that will be part of our discussion today. So it's been cool to see all these different things and be involved in lots of mostly startups, but also some larger companies like ServiceNow most recently as well. And for fun, I've got 3 kids at home. I got a little piano over here next to me. So I like to play the piano when I can, go running when I can. And do some podcasting. So you mentioned, Juan and I do a podcast together. It's called Catalog and Cocktails. It started off at the very beginning of the pandemic. And we were like, man, how do we connect with people in this virtual world? And, a lot of cool data podcasts cropped up. Yours is one of the best ones out there. And so it's cool to do that and a lot of fun. So Juan and I get to do that. And it's called Catalog and Cocktails because we drink cocktails while we talk with data people.
That might be a nice ad for Data Unchained then.
That's one of the things we do, right? So we got, 250 episodes. We're over 5 years doing it. So a lot of cocktails we've had. And a lot of data conversations too. So.
Lots of old fashions.
Very nice. Very nice. You'll have to invite me to yours so I can have an old fashioned with both of you.
Yes,
Definitely.
please.
All right. So we're going to talk about AI readiness for the enterprise today. Let's jump right into, maybe you can give us your feel. I mean, ServiceNow touches so many big enterprise customers. You guys are great area of authority in this space. Can you give us your feedback on when an enterprise says they're trying to be AI ready or they are AI ready? What does that mean to them?
Yeah, great question. And I think just to kind of start off, right, a lot of people know ServiceNow traditionally as more of like a workflow and ticket management system, right? And it started off mostly in kind of the support and IT realm, but now is involved in running all sorts of different workflows across the enterprise, from HR to, IT to finance to legal to, so on and so forth. And now with AI, right, a lot of folks want to automate business processes, and they want to be able to leverage AI to either augment people, so that way you can do things in a more scalable fashion, or so that way you can actually automate whole, tasks or parts of business processes. And that's exciting because that's going to allow us to do a lot more with our time and with our systems. But to your comment that you're making around AI readiness, I think one of the things that both ServiceNow has figured out, and I think the whole industry has figured out, is that we're not going to just take LLMs and Gen AI, especially systems, and throw them at problems and it just be able to solve them for us, right? It needs context about your data. It needs context about your business. It needs context about people, like who are you and what is your job and what do you do and what are your decisions and things like that. And so this concept of AI readiness and AI ready data has become very much front and center. It's something that ServiceNow is trying to solve. It's something that a lot of companies are trying to solve. And I think where a lot of the focal point is around governance, really, right? It's kind of a slightly unsexy term. Mostly came to the fore, I think, around the early 2000s into the kind of early 2010s, as you have like SOX regulation. You've got the financial meltdown, and so you get a lot new regulations and things like that, and needing to manage safety essentially and regulatory compliance. But what started off as much more of a regulatory use case, now fast forward to today, is at the center of this whole AI readiness conversation. Because if you don't have trusted data, quality data, good documentation, you're going to really struggle with leveraging AI in an effective way.
One thing that I wanted to add here is that when we start looking at data, humans will interact with that data, and they have all that context in their heads and how they're interacting with it. But now, because we want AI, we want these agents, these large language models, Gen AI, we're going to pass work to them. Those things don't have all that context and don't have all that semantics, all that meaning. So I think very early on, people were experimenting like, oh, this is great. There's all this magical stuff, but then it works great. I can trust it for kind of my personal things a little bit, but hey, for my enterprise where I want to keep track of I need to have accuracy of the numbers, like that's a different ballpark. And I think that's what people start realizing. Oh, wait, I need to really keep track of my meaning, the understanding, the knowledge, the semantics like that. That's why metadata has kind of very quickly, people have been working on it for so long, and then just suddenly just increase and like, oh, wait, that stuff that we were working on that we really didn't want to pay attention to that much because now we need that. And now everybody is focusing on the semantics, the context of metadata. I think context is probably going to be the big popular word in 2026. So long story short, AI ready data is having data that you actually have an understanding to. You have meaning, semantics, and it aligns with the different contexts that you may have within your organization.
I do think it's interesting. A lot of the topics that, we've all been around this space for a while now that maybe weren't in vogue or, they were very niche-y and where people were thinking about them have become really important now with AI. And, I think about the governance topic, assigning and creating metadata. We've all talked about this stuff for ages, especially on the metadata side. Sometimes it just never got prioritized. And now all of a sudden it matters a lot. And AI is definitely a driving factor for that. I'm interested in your thoughts in that area of, as you're adding context and kind of that semantic layer or metadata layer, how do companies and how do enterprises approach that right now? Is it lots of different groups are all taking different approaches to it? Is there kind of a standard way that this is being implemented across business units, data types?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think there's an alignment that's starting to happen on some best practices. I think as a space, we're all still learning, right? From vendors to practitioners. So I think there's a degree to which we're figuring this out as we go. But some of the best practices we see people really starting to hone into to leverage context in these applications is, well, first of all, it's use case specific. It's fit for purpose, right? So this idea that, oh, well, your organization is AI ready. Like, that's kind of a misrepresentation of what it means to be AI ready. Because what does that even mean? Does that mean that you have perfect data or something like that? And you have, 1,000 GPU systems? Like that doesn't make sense. It's boiling the ocean, right? And what it means to have next generation, like high quality AI capabilities is changing by the minute, right? As these models get better and things like that. And so really it's about, hey, for your specific use case, do you have trusted data that you can leverage, and where does that context live that that particular AI application needs? So like, just to give a specific example, let's say that you're trying to identify customers that might be at risk of churning. And then you want to have an agent automatically propose some deals to that customer that allows you to get in front of their potential churn. And rather than it be reactive, you're being proactive to say, hey, I'll renew you for 10%, or how would you like a free add-on or something like that, to see if you can actually address it in a proactive way. Well, then you need to understand, well, what are the offers that we have available, right? What does churn mean for our organization? What does churn propensity mean for my organization? These things need to be defined somewhere. And so from a technical standpoint, what's usually happening is you're going to store that context somewhere, right? If it is something that can be a little bit more probabilistic, and something that you don't necessarily need to depend on a literal way, then you might just have it be like a document that you feed into a vector database or something like that. And it's going to be a little bit more of a document-oriented approach. But if you want to have it be much more structured and dependable, more of a rule that it's going to leverage, then that context needs to live in a graph or in your catalog or something like that. And then usually what's happening is what's very popular right now are patterns involving retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. And so we're seeing, knowledge graph RAG approaches where folks are trying to get the right context, pass it to the LLM, and then have a feedback loop. Because a lot of times these agents, you're not doing it in one shot. You're actually creating a feedback loop so that way it gets to the right answer. So that's a little bit of a blend of both the business and the technical, but that's kind of the architecture that we're seeing here. And Juan, I know you're involved with quite a few customers that are working on this. What would you add to that?
So there's two aspects. Let's talk about first the kind of the business side and the technical side. I mean, we got to state the obvious over and over again. You realize, right? It has to be use case driven, right? What is the business problem you're trying to go solve? But to be very, very specific, I tell folks is like, do you know what are the top objectives of your organizations? If you do OKRs, what is literally the objectives that the CEO, that the board is caring about, right? So then whatever work that you're doing, you need to make sure that you're tying it as directly as specific to an objective, because otherwise it's just blah, 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 and people are just experimenting things. So that's the number one thing to go do, because that's how you're going to avoid boiling the ocean, and you know that you're doing something that's going to provide a value for. So this kind of seems obvious, but I have to repeat this over and over again. So that's one aspect. And then once you have that as the framework, that's what's going to help me really focus. So, and this is just regardless about AI right now. Like this is, you were saying to Molly before, it's like, this is the thing that we were doing before, but it wasn't kind of as sexy or needed, but it is now. This is like eating our vegetables and going to the gym. Like now people are realizing, yeah, we need to go do that type of stuff. And I think these are the foundations that we need, which is not just for AI, but it's for just, this is going to help me to do my business intelligence even better, my analytics that I'm doing right, the machine learning models that I'm building already better for that. And I think when you start thinking about that, you start making these investments, the foundations, which are going to really, what I call the 1 + 1 is greater than 2. So if I'm going to be focusing on really understanding, go back to Tim's point, okay, what is churn, or how am I defining what net revenue is? Well, there's a specific formula that I'm going to go do that. And that's a formula that I'm going to keep manage, I'm going to govern, and I'm going to map it to this particular data set or that, or heck, maybe there are multiple definitions of net revenue. Fine. At least I know the context that this is the net revenue definition for marketing, the net revenue for sales, for the customer team. We know exactly what that is, such that when people are looking for data, because they're trying to do analysis, they're trying to build a machine learning model because they want to be able to chat with their data, you already have all that context. You define it once and you're reusing it for so many different things. I think that is the mentality that we need to have. And I think we need to start getting those incentives to be able to define, to do that work and make sure that it is reusable, repeatable, because again, that's how we scale.
When a customer calls you and says, hey, I need your help with my AI, do they generally have a specific project? Is it the OKRs? They're like, I have these OKRs, I'm trying to figure out how to map AI to it. Or is it, my boss told me to build an AI factory? Like, what do they call you asking for?
I'll start off a little bit and then I'll pass on to Tim. So the honest no BS is that I think for most people it's like we got to do something with AI, and I think this is the typical thing. Like the board is telling us to go do something, we have to go do something with AI. So yeah, I would agree that the majority of the people are kind of just doing something, right? And I think the strategic data leaders are the ones who are really able to kind of pause things a little bit and realize, I get that you're trying to go, we need to go do that, but we also need to, they're making that translation and transition to, but this is what the business really needs. Now, what you want to be able to go say is like, hey, yeah, we should definitely use AI for this problem we're solving because it's going to augment that. It's going to make this problem that we're working on to make it faster, better, and so forth. And I think that's the way how to get there. Now, it's all about the trust. So we really realize that if data leaders are trusted by the business executives, then they're the ones who have the way to push back, saying, I get that's the hype. We want to go do that stuff, but these are the real goals we need to go do. And if you have data leaders who still need to earn a lot more trust, they're thinking, hey, the way to earn trust is I'm being told I need to go do that AI stuff, and so that I'm going to go do that. So that's kind of what we see. When we get a lot of folks who are saying, oh, we want to go do this AI, then I actually see it as our responsibility as not just vendors, but like as partners that want to do, because our success is your success, is to really push you and ask why, right? The 5 whys to figure out like, this is really where we should be focusing on. And I think that's really why I personally want to be able to work with customers. Is like, I just don't want to go implement some technology that will become a shelfware later on, because that's not going to make me look good. Like, I really want to understand what your problem is, because solving your problem makes you successful, which makes us successful. But
I think that's a really that's a good framing. And just to extend a word that you said, Molly, you called it like the AI factory, right? I think that organizations are trying to establish this kind of process and capability within their organization. And as Juan mentioned, like strategic leaders are thinking about, okay, where's the low-hanging fruit, right? How do I manage expectations properly here? Because, everybody gets to play around with ChatGPT and things like that and gets very excited about what could be possible. But the goal is not just to have like wandering conversations, it's to have real business impact. And so I think they're trying to do things at two levels, right? One of them is more at the foundational level, right? So if it's the factory, it's kind of like the factory floor, right? And that's where things like data governance, metadata management, data quality, observability, right? These are the things that are really foundational about capturing context, managing context, assuring that we're passing trusted information to different AI agents. And so this foundation is really, really important in kind of the factory floor. But then what sits on top of that is an agile iteration process, right? And really good data and AI and analytics teams are partnering with the business, finding the key stakeholders, building a roadmap and a backlog of what are the most valuable use cases that we can focus on, and then iterating so that way they don't just create cool looking demos, right? And they actually iterate in partnership with them to move from kind of POC to alpha to beta to ultimately rolling something out in production. Because we don't just want cool demos. We actually want to be able to roll these things out to production. So the ones who are laying that foundation and then doing an iterative process on top of it, they're the ones who are being successful. And we see more and more companies now rolling out these AI applications in production and seeing a lot of real value.
And one more thing to add there quickly are the data teams that are actually working with the business lines, because you want to have that feedback loop. And that means that I understand what your business problem is. And it's not just, you're telling me what you need, I'm just going to give it to you and then I just leave. Like, no, because what you really want to do is like actually be part of that, have ownership too there. That's why even like you need to be connected to their objectives.
Well, that reminds me a lot of when data scientists first appeared. They could come up with lots of interesting observations about data, but didn't necessarily have anything to do with what the business needed to know. It was kind of an interesting dynamic as data science came about. But you kind of went in a direction I was thinking about asking, Juan, that there's certainly this pressure. Use AI, go faster, don't let us be left behind, no matter what industry it is. How do people do things in parallel? There's a lot of foundational business process work that both you and Tim have talked about. getting data ready, whether it's applying semantics or making it accessible to whichever models you're using or agents you're using. How can businesses work in parallel as the IT and infrastructure and data teams get things organized while the business figures out their policies and their goals? Can this happen in parallel?
It definitely, and it has to happen in parallel, because if it doesn't, then
it'll be 5 years from now, and you won't have anything going.
Let's think about two things. Let's kind of do the thought exercise of it not happening in parallel, right? So if I do, let's call it the bottoms up approach, where we're like, oh, we need to have this pristine infrastructure and architecture and come up with the data, then okay, yeah. So first of all, you need to kind of make the case to get all this in resources, money, time to go do, and all that is happening, you're not showing any value. You're showing technical stuff, but so that's not going to work, right? Now, if you completely do top down, where you're thinking about, the business needs this, and I'm giving this, and then what ends up happening is when you become like this reporting machine, like, I just do, and then you're cranking. You're not really knowing, like, okay, I gave this to the business, but I don't even know what it is or how it's being used, how valuable it is, and then what ends up is you generate a bunch of debt. And then you say, well, I'm living a bunch of debt, and then you have to spend so much time with that. So that's kind of what, if you go on each of these, on the left side or the right hand, or the top and the bottom. So you really want to find it as a spectrum. So you have to go do that. But a mentality that needs to change is arguably like perfect is the enemy of great. Right. And I think this goes back what Tim was saying, is that we want to have a roadmap. I want to say, we're going to go do this thing first and then this thing second, and not everything is going to come out as a big bang. And when you start having that roadmap, you set the right expectations. You want all these things. We're only going to do this for this part. And I think once you start kind of getting, let's call it, parts of the product out, you are also making an investment in that foundation. So think about it almost as a tax for the foundation work that you're going to do, but you know that it's kind of like a slice of the work is going to be done to that foundation. And then you start iterating around that stuff. You want to be able to have the quick wins, kind of get people, the momentum going, people saying, I love that. I want more of that. And you're like, perfect. You want more of that? But to do more, I need to actually do this other thing too, which is kind of like in the back end, in the back scene. But if I don't do that stuff, you can't get that. I'm like, okay, got it. I understand you need to go do it. So I think that's part of it. And an analogy I call it is like the iron thread. You want to be able to go all the way from the top to the bottom, right? Business all the way to the technical things, but it's a thread. It's a thread. So don't go do everything, but it's iron. It's really strong, but for something very specific. And then you go and wrap another thread around that iron. And then these things get stronger and stronger. And that's how you start iterating around that. I don't know, Tim, you take it away.
Yeah, I think that was really great. Exactly what you said. One thing that I would add, which I think is separate and additional, is the operating model, right? And first of all, if you can just get more resources, that's great, right? So for any like chief data officer, chief AI officer, right? If you could just get more engineers and do more, great. Now you can parallelize, right? But like, I think all of us live in a resource constrained reality, right? Despite all the excitement around AI. And so what that means is that in order to parallelize, in addition to like what Juan talked about, you also need to build an operating model that kind of identifies the things that need to be centralized, right? Like what are the things that my team needs to do with my own resources, right? Because maybe it has broad-based impact, right? Across all functions, across lots of business units, or maybe because the expertise really is centralized within your group, right? But then what you see, I think a lot of companies trying to do, right? Like, why are they rolling out, Claude code and things like that to all their employees? They're trying to figure out a way to federate the innovation that's going on and the impact that AI can have. And so I think that's what's very interesting is when you take some of these platforms and you try to empower more people with them, right? And for example, ServiceNow has its AI platform, right? That people can build apps with and things like that, that you can get a federated approach. And so whether it's a federated embedded approach where you've got some central people kind of interacting with the spokes, or it's literally a fully delegated approach where you're saying, hey, I'm giving you tools. You do what you want to do and just, keep me updated. There's going to be a little governance around it, right? Oh, we have an AI council every month. Like you can present at the AI council if you want to. If you want to roll something out to production, I got to give you the thumbs up, right? So long story short is I think these operating models, we have to get right, but also it'll never be perfect. So you got to iterate on it. But that's the key. So that way it's not like it's all on, for the data leaders that are listening, it's not all on you. It's not like you're the one Superman or Superwoman who has to drive all the the AI progress for the organization. You're creating an environment and an operating model where lots of flowers can bloom.
It is very cultural dependent of your organization. So if you're a very centralized cultural organization, then it's hard to put in a completely decentralized federated.
Different
and vice
companies
versa,
are different, right?
If you're very decentralized, so that really depends on the culture of your organization. You really need to understand that. That's one thing. And then another kind of framework that I've learned in this work for us is, I call it the fixed, flexible, and custom. So there are things that you're going to realize that need to be fixed just because of it's just mandated, right? This is our definition of a customer that we have agreed upon, and we agreed, and that's it. Everybody uses it, period. This is our definition of what PII means, and we need to agree, because PII people we talk about PII, but that can mean different things to different people. This is our definition, and it's for regulatory purposes. You need to go do that type of stuff. But then there's something flexible. It's like, wait, I'm trying to go do this. I looked up in the fix, it doesn't exist. But it kind of exists. I'm going to extend in my version of that stuff. Or custom means I'm in a green field. I'm starting something new. And then if you're starting something new, it kind of becomes more custom, more flexible, becomes more fixed depending on the needs around that. And another aspect that I also bring up, and this is a cultural thing, again, this being comfortable with ambiguity, is, hey, if you realize that there are things that people that are probably incorrect because there's two different ways of viewing this, but nobody's complaining about it, then either everything's okay or nobody is using it, so just let it be. But if people are complaining about it, that's great news. That's friction. That's energy. There's an investment. Let's go figure what that is. And it's because maybe there were two custom things that we realized, we should probably start consolidating in kind of a shared agreement. And then that will naturally come up from that custom to maybe something flexible, something fixed. And then you start iterating on these things. And I think that when people want to be full in control and they realize, wait, we kind of have to let it go a little bit. That's hard. Letting go of your Legos is a hard thing sometimes.
At least for us only children, that's for sure.
Well, there's a good article on that. You should look it up, letting go of your Legos.
So when you think about, this is complex, multidimensional, multifaceted, and different organizations have different requirements. How do organizations get out of experimentation and into production? So saying, yep, we've passed the litmus test of there's a value prop, you have to make sure the right data is being used by the right people. A lot of the things that we're talking about. I mean, you mentioned like monthly council, but are there checklists that are becoming kind of standard of you have to have done and passed this test on these 20 points and now you're ready to go? Or kind of how do organizations get there?
I think there's a few elements here. One is, we see a lot of organizations that are getting mature here having some kind of a council, which we've mentioned, I think once or twice, right? And so that's a thing where you can make sure that you have a checkpoint, right? Now, even that is a little bit manual, right? In the way that you're trying to create a bit of an artificial throttle on things. So some organizations we see really creating more of a checklist. And I think a good analogy out there is you think about like data, like software quality, right? Like if you're about to push software into production, you usually have a checklist of like, okay, did all the unit tests pass? To have the integration test pass? Do we have documentation, right? Did the product manager sign off on the acceptance criteria? So these kinds of checklists also apply to AI, but have some AI specific oriented things, right? And it connects to some of the foundations we talked about, right? Like, for example, is it logged in our catalog? Is there documentation around it? Have we defined what fit for purpose quality means for this particular AI model or AI agent? But also it can relate to, things like who's going to use this? And what does success look like when we roll this out, right? So it gets a little bit, I think, into the business side as well, which is important because if you're going to roll out these agents to production, it's gone from kind of pilot land where you're just kind of experimenting and you need to actually support it. Like it needs to be something that now people could rely on and isn't going to atrophy and become something that maybe they liked it at first or they trusted it at first, but now they don't trust it ongoing, right? And so this kind of almost product management oriented approach where you care not just about the launch of AI, but also the ongoing caretaking and management of the quality and the trust. And then sometimes retirement becomes really important because maybe that AI model doesn't make sense or AI agent doesn't make sense anymore. Don't be afraid to then kill it, put it away, and put your energy and your resources towards something else. So I think that's one key thing.
Tim and I kind of put out a framework for data products, but actually I think it applies to AI agents and anything. We call it the ABCs of data products. So you want to be able to think about accountability, boundaries, contracts and expectations, your downstream consumers, and the explicit knowledge around things. So accountability, right, is like, well, who owns this? Who's responsible for this? Who fixes it when it's broken, right? All that type of stuff. Boundaries, right? So this is about bringing product mindset. Like, let's go draw a box in here, right? Am I fulfilling everything in that box? Am I getting requirements that are outside of that box, and so forth, right? What is my roadmap? My boxes are going to be expanding. Am I heading there? So see contracts and expectations, right? Who are my consumers and what are they expecting? How are they going to go do this? Am I fulfilling all those SLAs, SLOs, and so forth? My downstream consumers,
how fast does it have to be?
How fast does it have to be?
Like
how are people supposed to interact with it? And my downstream consumers, right? I am building something for a set of consumers. Have they tested this? Are they satisfied with this, right? Who are the next possible consumers out of this too? And the explicit knowledge is, I want to make sure that this data product, people will find it, will understand what it's about and how they can use this, right? I think so. We put this out there several years ago, and I believe the same framework applies for building agents and models and stuff like that. And I think that would be some of the checklists. And arguably, it's not like you have to think about all these different things. It's like, what is it? What you need with the organization? And at the end of the day, I think it's a product mindset that's coming now into the fold.
And I figured the type of company you come from with ServiceNow, that those kinds of frameworks and checklists are part of what you work with your customers to build. Thinking though, as you've evolved some of these, maybe data best practices that were coming about as we were thinking about big data and analytics now in this AI world, you do have this new member of the team, the agents or the machines. How are they evolving when you think about what does the human decide? How do they work with the agent? What do you let the agent do on their own? Kind of how are you advising customers to think about that human in the loop design with the machines?
I think in general, even though there's a desire and a vision to achieve full automation around different business processes and things like that, and certainly ServiceNow is at the forefront of that, right? Autonomous IT, autonomous customer support management, right? Right now, the best practice really is human in the loop, right? It's just how can we make that human in the loop only when it really matters to ping you, because what's interesting when you really scale automation and AI, if when the human comes into the loop is too frequent or too noisy, you start to not pay attention to it. And I'm an iPhone user, right? And I get lots of notifications. I don't do a good job of managing all the notifications that are showing up on my phone. And so what happens is, unless it's really like a text message, I'm not really paying attention to what's hitting my phone. And so that's an important part of the human in the loop process, and something at ServiceNow we've tried to focus a lot on is like, how do we make sure that like the right tasks come to a person, and the stuff that really should just be automated or just set everything up on a platter so I can say, yeah, that looks good, approved, that happens. So I think that's really important. I think also what's really interesting about the human in the loop aspect is, if you invest in context and if you're investing in the semantics, then you're going to feel more comfortable letting AI agents take on more responsibility. And so that's why you see, ServiceNow investing in bringing in metadata management and governance and things like that as part of its portfolio. And that's why you see now everybody in the AI space talking about context management and semantics and things like that. So I think that's where you get a little bit of, you slow down a little bit to speed up. Doing that kind of work is that slow down piece that helps you speed up.
What we're seeing is that this context is at the center, because what you want is for users to realize, oh, wow, this agent actually understands this stuff. So the question is like, I asked a question, how many customers do we have or whatever, right? And like, wait, we actually have 3 official definitions of customers by department, but I think because you work in the marketing department, I know that already. You probably care about the marketing definition of customer. So I can just give you the answer and I can explain to you, look, this is the definition that came from this stuff. By the way, if you have more questions about that, here is the lineage around this stuff. Here's a person you should go talk to, and so forth. And I think that is a context that starts giving people more trust, and then they're actually going to keep. And that's kind of just gets the momentum going. Okay, I get it. I trust it. Let's keep using this more and more.
One more thing to mention that I think is interesting in this human in the loop arena is is where does the human come into the loop? So there's like a user experience aspect that I think is really interesting. So like at ServiceNow, we have kind of like 4 different AI user experience paradigms, right? Like one of them is in the context of a workflow. So like you're in a workflow, you get a task. Hopefully, as I mentioned, right, it's a task that actually deserves your attention, right? So that's kind of more your workflow. Then there's more of the AI native or AI first experience, which is like, hey, many of you have used ChatGPT and Claude and Copilot and things like that, right? That chat experience, it's more of a chat first kind of paradigm, right? And then you've got more of the like embedded approach. Well, could it ping me in Slack? Could it ping me in Teams? Could it send me a text message, right? And then, even things like a dashboard, right? If I'm in Tableau or Power BI or some dashboard, could it ping me there? And could I interact with it in context there? And then lastly is kind of like custom experiences, because people build custom intranet portals, people build custom customer support and customer applications and things like that. How do we provide them kind of the right experience and the right place where that human in the loop should happen?
So as you guys look forward, I know it's hard to predict given the cadence of change that's happening in this space right now, but thinking the next 12 to 24 months and thinking specifically about the enterprises that will be able to say, claim success. We did it. We implemented AI and we're an AI first company or AI forward company, whatever the term ends up being. What will differentiate those who are successful and those who are not?
I think one of the big differentiators, and I think it's been a theme throughout this entire conversation, is the foundations, right? And so those who have invested in the governance, the quality, and increasingly thinking about metadata and context are really going to be the ones who are more successful. And a lot of folks are going to be building those foundations potentially for the second, third, or fourth time in recent history, because folks have attempted this in the past, but it's been more of a passive approach, or it's been just focused on regulatory governance and not really addressing more of the enablement part of data or the AI usage part of data. They're going to be trying to lay that foundation properly, and then as we mentioned earlier, trying to make sure that it's fit for purpose, right? So not trying to boil the ocean with that foundation. The tooling and the processes and the operational model all have to be there, but then applying it in a specified way to different use cases, that's going to be really key. And one term that I think kind of got popularized maybe 3 years ago or so, but I think it's going to come back to the fore again, is active metadata. Because a lot of people, they've been collecting metadata information, but they're not doing a lot with it, right? It's passive. It's kind of sitting in the library, and nobody's going to the library. But active is, how do we actually incorporate that metadata in proactive ways, whether it's a machine learning model or an AI agent or rules-based, to take actions, be part of AI workflows, things like that. So that's going to be a big focus, is active metadata.
So many things, but I'm going to pick 2. Number one is that whatever AI agent project you have clearly shown how it's making money, saving money, and then there's also the whole mitigate risk. At the end of it, those are the 3 things that organizations care about. So I think you'll be able to go to very specifically tie that down. And second, which is the foundations part, if you do the foundations right, that means that you'll be able to do more with less. So I think every time you're going to build the next thing, it's going to be cheaper. And I think that's a true sign of success. I mean, I'm just putting economics around this stuff. So I would say that the companies who are being successful, being AI first and forward, are the ones who are saying, oh, we got that project, that new thing that's going to involve data. Perfect. I know that's actually going to cost me less to go do that thing, that previous thing that I did before. And I think that's the true sign of success, because you're compounding all that investments that you did in foundations correctly. At the end of the day, like, we're seeing this also, like, I want to be able to have increase, my company's growing, we're going to hire more employees, and the cost of supporting that should go lower. We're going to have more customers, the cost to support customers should continue to go lower and lower. That's the sign of success.
All right, guys. So as we wrap up, I want to switch gears for just a second. We've talked a lot about all the things enterprises and different work groups should do. What's maybe the one misconception or the one thing people need to unlearn about AI that just hasn't proven to be true?
Yeah, I think one thing I'll call out is, I think that as there's been a lot of experimentation with AI, that some companies, not all, like there's a lot that are being more strategic, but there's a lot of companies also that are thinking that, okay, if I rolled out, like a Chat GPT or Claude or, Copilot to my organization, that I've kind of achieved my AI goals, right? That like now everybody has access to it and they could be more productive, right? And that is not the bar that we should hold ourselves. That's a low-hanging fruit that we've aligned on. Great, right? We should take advantage of any low-hanging fruit that we can take advantage of. But the true value is going to come over the next couple of years here of embedding and incorporating AI or AI-powered workflows directly into the business process and the business line, right? So in your HR process, how can we make sure people are happier, that they leave the company less, that we hire the right people? In IT and in support, right? How do we make sure that people have more uptime and better experiences? In sales, how do we make sure that we're driving more sales, right? How do we provide better leads to our salespeople? How do we, onboard customers, a little bit faster? That's where you're going to get the value from AI, is in incorporating it directly into the business operations. So I think that's going to be a misconception people are going to overcome over the course of this year.
You stole my thunder in a way there, but let me expand on that. Tim and I gave a talk at Big Data London. I think we said a couple of things about what you should stop doing and should start doing. So you should stop being in your own bubble of data analytics and realize that there's everybody else around that. You need to start then working with your business counterparts and actually developing your OKRs and your objectives with them directly. So I think that's one. So going back to our conception is that, yes, my goal is that data analytics is my world. And that's what, no, you got to get out of that. That's one of the important things. And another one is just stop thinking about your end goal is to generate analytics and insights. We think about faster time to insights. That's not your goal. That is not the goal. The goal is, how do I take action with those insights? Again, connect it back to the business. And I think that's the difference. And you traditionally see people I created this dashboard, I created this machine learning model, we created this chatbot, you can go do things. That's not their goal. Your goal is to be able to drive action, workflows, to be able to go make the impact of those insights back into the business. So those are the two things I wanted to call out.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's good that you two are kind of aligned on the way you're looking at it. So as we wrap, I want to thank you both for joining and sharing your very extensive knowledge in this space. Are there any places related to ServiceNow offerings or how to engage as enterprises who are listening to this episode are thinking, I think I really ought to reach out to these guys? What would you point them to?
I would say go to servicenow.com and start exploring around and learning a little bit more about ServiceNow. I think a lot of people in both the data realm and the AI realm are starting to realize that ServiceNow is not just a workflows company. It's workflows and data and AI all together. And we're doing some really interesting stuff around context management and around data governance and data management. So I think it's just explore and learn more.
To add to that, for folks listening who are living the data world, they're like, wait, ServiceNow? What does ServiceNow have to do with data? Well, that's changing. And our ask is two things. Number one, go reach out to your ServiceNow colleagues internally, because ServiceNow is everywhere. So if you work at a large company, you probably are already a ServiceNow customer. So go reach out to them and kind of help build bridges. And we need to do that, right? Usually data teams work underneath the CIO and IT. So I think there's an opportunity there. So that's number one. And second, follow us, Tim and myself, on LinkedIn, and just go reach out to us. Happy that we listen to our podcast. You can find a lot of the material also on the ServiceNow community YouTube channel that we're putting all our podcasts, and that's a way to go really broaden and get to meet more of your peers.
Sounds great. Tim, Juan, really lovely to meet you. I'm going to follow you as well and hope to keep the connection going. So thanks for joining Data Unchained.
Thanks so much for having us. And I'm looking forward to sharing that cocktail with you and having you on our show.
Perfect.
Sounds fantastic. Thanks for listening to Data Unchained, powered by Hammerspace. To learn more, visit hammerspace.com. If you have a guest you would like to hear on the show, email me at molly@hammerspace.com.